My son banned me from his $600,000 home at Christmas, saying his wife's parents didn't want me there. I had poured more than $250,000 into that place while eating peanut butter for dinner myself. The humiliation was crushing. But the moment I stopped paying, their perfect life began to crumble, and this was only the beginning. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat alone in my living room, the old recliner groaning beneath my weight, and the silence pressing down heavier than ever. The late afternoon light fell across the carpet in tired streaks, and there, above the mantel, hung the photograph of Maria. Her smile was frozen in time, her eyes kind as ever, and I found myself whispering to her like I had so many nights before. "Maria," I said quietly, "you wouldn't believe what he told me. Our son, our own Michael, he told me I wasn't welcome in his house for Christmas." The words burned my throat even as I said them, because the truth felt like a betrayal that reached down to my bones. And that house he shut me out of, that $600,000 home, was standing only because I had sacrificed nearly everything I had left to give. I remembered the years stacked up like bricks, each one a sacrifice meant for him. $60,000 for his college tuition, money Maria and I scraped together by cutting corners and giving up vacations we never took. Then came the $25,000 for his first car, a bright new sedan he drove off the lot while I kept my rusty pickup running on bald tires. I remembered the look on his face, all pride and entitlement, like the world owed him something more. And when he married Jennifer, there was the $50,000 wedding. White flowers, an orchestra, a reception hall filled with people I hardly knew, all of it paid for with checks that drained accounts I had promised myself I would never touch. I had watched them dance, believing I was securing their happiness. Now, sitting in that old recliner, it felt like every dollar had been burned for nothing. The house itself was the cruelest reminder. $600,000 of stone, wood, and glass. And me, the fool who had put $80,000 down by taking a second mortgage on the home Maria and I had built together. I could still smell the faint scent of sawdust from the days I had put up those beams with my own hands. I had believed Michael needed a fresh start, a safe place for his family, and I thought I was doing what any father would do. But now, when I looked at that house, I realized it was no longer a symbol of love. It was a fortress I had paid for, but was no longer allowed to enter. I could picture the framed photographs hanging on their walls, family portraits where I was fading into the background, slowly erased from the story I had helped write. It hit me like a hammer. They had taken my sacrifices and built a life without me. Memories crept in where they didn't belong, mixing with the sting of rejection. I saw Michael as a boy again, small hands fumbling with Christmas ornaments as he tried to hang them too high on the tree. His laughter filled the house back then, echoing off the walls Maria had painted in warm earth tones. We would sit on the floor surrounded by lights and the smell of cinnamon, while Maria handed us cookies straight from the oven. That was Christmas to me. That was family. Now, to be told I wasn't wanted, to be told I embarrassed Jennifer's side of the family, was like watching that laughter get buried in the snow. I closed my eyes and whispered again to Maria, "Do you see it, sweetheart? Do you see how I've become a stranger in my own son's life?" My chest ached, as if her silence was answering me, reminding me of the weight I had carried alone since she passed. The insults hadn't come all at once. They had arrived like drops of water on stone, slow, steady, eroding everything I once believed unbreakable. Jennifer's words came back to me with sharp edges. She never hid her disdain for where I came from, the way I worked with my hands, the accent that carried traces of the old neighborhood. She called my cooking too much spice, wrinkled her nose at the tamales I brought, forgetting she had eaten them every Sunday for years when money was tight. I remembered her parading that $800 handbag around the room, the one she said she deserved, bought with money I had handed them without question. And the professional-grade mixer, $2,200, sitting on their counter like a trophy, was bought on my credit card. Every purchase was a wound I covered, telling myself I was helping. Now I saw it for what it was, Arrogance and greed, dressed up as need. The more I thought about it, the more something inside me shifted. At first it was pain, deep and cutting, the kind that made my hands tremble and my throat dry. But beneath the pain was something hotter, something sharper. Anger. No, more than anger. It was the realization that I had allowed myself to be bled dry for people who never once looked at me as family. They saw me as a wallet, a driver, a man to be tolerated so long as the checks cleared. My heart pounded as the truth settled in. I had spent years believing that love meant sacrifice. But sacrifice without respect wasn't love. It was servitude. And I was done serving. I clenched my fists and spoke into the empty room, the words rising like fire in my chest. "They think I'm weak," I muttered, "but they're about to learn just how wrong they are." I rose slowly from the recliner, my knees aching from years of work, and walked to the corner of the room where my desk sat, under a lamp with a crooked shade. The wood was scratched from decades of use, but it held something more valuable than any new furniture could. Papers, records, proof. I pulled open the drawer and brought out the thick manila folder I had avoided for months. Bank statements, mortgage documents, receipts, all marked with numbers that told a story nobody wanted to hear. I spread them across the desk like evidence laid out in a courtroom. $3,000 gone each month, funneled into Michael's mortgage. A total that made my stomach turn when I added it up. $180,000 gone in 5 years. And that was only the mortgage, the down payment, the renovations, the furniture, the little emergencies Jennifer claimed were essential. All of it built a tower of debt that had my name etched into the foundation. I stared at the papers until the numbers blurred, my breath shallow as if the ink itself was suffocating me. Yet beneath the suffocation was clarity. For the first time in years, I saw not just the loss, but the power those papers gave me. This wasn't just money I had thrown away. It was proof. It was leverage. It was the truth that could topple the carefully crafted image Michael and Jennifer paraded to the world. I leaned back in my chair, letting the realization settle like a stone dropped in a still pond. The ripples spread through me, washing away the last traces of doubt. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't finished. I still had a voice, and I still had the means to fight back. The house was quiet, shadows stretching long as the evening came in, but my heart felt alive in a way it hadn't in years. I looked again at Maria's photograph, her smile steady, her eyes kind. "They think they've buried me, Maria," I whispered. "But they don't know I still have strength left. They don't know I still fight myself." My hand rested on the papers, the weight of them solid under my palm. In that moment, I understood something I had forgotten long ago. Respect isn't given. It's taken back when it's stolen. And I was ready to take it back. The phone sat on the desk beside the papers, its glow faint in the dim light. I didn't pick it up yet, but I could feel the decision hovering over me like thunder before a storm. Soon I would make the call. Soon I would remind them that I wasn't the weak old man they imagined. The stage was set, the evidence gathered. And as the night deepened around me, I knew this was only the beginning. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. I stared at the stack of papers I had spread across my old desk the night before and felt the same steady heat in my chest. Not the fire of panic, not grief. Something cleaner. Resolve. The sun had barely lifted itself over the roof lines when I reached for the phone. I did not wait for coffee. I did not wait for doubt. I typed the number from the corner of my bank statement and pressed call. A patient recorded voice walked me through the options. I breathed slowly, like a diver before a deep plunge. When a human voice finally answered, warm and professional, I said my name, my account, and my request in a tone that did not shake. I told her I needed to cancel a recurring transfer of $3,000 a month. It went out on the 15th. It had gone out for years. She pulled up the record. I could hear her typing. "Yes, sir," she said. "I see 5 years of payments, set to continue." Her voice softened in a way that told me she understood more than the screen showed. She asked for verification. I gave her what she needed. Then she asked, "Effective immediately?" I looked at Maria's photograph on the wall as if her eyes could read the weight of the question. "Immediately," I said. "Please confirm it will not be drafted again. Not today, not next month, not ever." She read back the cancellation, gave me a reference number, and told me the transfer was stopped. For the first time in a very long time, the money I had bled into someone else's comfort would stay where it belonged, with me. I set the phone down and let the room fill with the quiet that follows a finished task. The quiet felt different. It had a shape. I could almost hear the click of a lock sliding into place. $3,000. Again and again, $180,000 over 5 long years. And that was only the mortgage. I looked at the notes I had made in thick pencil, like a teacher grading a test the student had tried to cheat on. $80,000 from the second mortgage on my house for their down payment. $50,000 for their wedding. $25,000 for his car. New floors. Rented furniture for showings during open house season. Dinners I never ate. Vacations I never took. And then a sentence like a slap. I was not welcome for Christmas in a $600,000 home I had practically built with my own 2 hands. I made coffee the way Maria taught me. 1 scoop too strong and a pinch of cinnamon. I carried the mug to the fireplace and sat on the hearth where the stone was cool under my palms. I took out the thickest envelope in the stack, the one stuffed with mortgage statements, bank confirmations, and printed emails that proved who had paid what and when. I did not need those to cancel the transfer, but I had kept them anyway. Maybe some part of me had known a day like this would come. I fed 3 pages to the fire, then 3 more. The paper curled into black petals and ash, and the heat moved across my face. A strange relief rose in me. Not the kind of relief you get when danger passes, the kind that comes when you finally stop lying to yourself. I raised the cup toward the photograph on the mantel. "Merry Christmas to me," I said, and the words did not taste bitter at all. The mail arrived late that afternoon. I heard the soft thump of envelopes hitting the box and walked out to the porch. The sky over Sacramento was winter pale, the air cool but not cold, and the street quiet in that special way neighborhoods get the week before Christmas, like everyone is saving their voices for a larger celebration. Bills. Ads. A holiday card from an old neighbor, the one who still sent photos of grandchildren I had never met. Then a thick white envelope with my name typed on it, and the return address of a downtown law firm I knew by reputation, not because I had ever needed them, but because people who enjoyed being seen enjoyed being represented by them. I stood there and turned the envelope in my hands as if the paper might confess its contents to my fingertips. It didn't. At my desk, I slid a letter opener under the flap. The first line landed like a small cold nail. "Dear Mr. Delgado, we represent Mrs. Jennifer Whitman." I read it twice to make sure I did not miss a trick. The letter acknowledged my historic financial support and then called every dollar I had poured into their life a gratuitous transfer, a gift made without expectation of return. It said I had no legal interest in the property at Brookside Heights. It advised me to cease any interference in the peaceful enjoyment of our client's residence and directed me to communicate only through counsel. The tone was smooth. I had heard that tone before from men who smile while they steal the coat off your back. It was the tone of people who believe only 2 things matter: appearances and leverage. The letter called me generous in one breath and erased me in the next. It was not a legal analysis. It was a dismissal. It was a slap wearing cufflinks. The tremor that took my hands when I set the letter down was not fear. It was fury held still. I exhaled until the shaking faded. I read it again, this time as if the words were evidence not of law, but of character. Every clause made one thing clear. They wanted to box me into silence. They wanted to make sure that if I spoke, I would sound unhinged. They wanted me off the stage. I turned the letter over and wrote one sentence on the back in a firm block hand, the way I wrote measurements on lumber, not for court, for me. This is how they say thank you. Then I opened a drawer and took out a smaller folder I had kept empty on purpose. I slid the letter inside and wrote on the tab, Whitman Counsel. I did not slam the drawer, though the urge was there. I closed it calmly. Calm was part of the plan I had not said out loud yet. The phone rang while I was still standing at the desk. Jennifer's number. I let it buzz twice, 3 times. I picked up on the 4th ring because people like Jennifer hear the 4th ring as power. "Victor," she said, sweet and sharp at once, like a candy with a razor inside. "We need a favor." Not a hello, not a question about my health. A need. Her parents were flying up that afternoon. She said the airline. She said the time. She said baggage claim. She said they expected a ride, and someone who could handle their luggage properly. She said it with that tone that wears a white glove even when it is not holding anything. I listened. I took one slow breath. Then I said, no, just that. No explanation. No apology. There was a beat of silence that sounded like disbelief. Then she started in with the list of reasons I should do it: family, holidays, tradition, respect. I let her finish the list she had memorized for herself. Then I said her name. I said it evenly. "Jennifer, from now on, I am not your bank. I am not your driver. I am not your contractor. I am my own man." The mask slipped a little on her side. Her voice dropped the sugary coat. She told me I was being petty. She said her father was connected and that people talk. She told me not to make things harder than they had to be. I told her I understood. I told her I was done making things easy. I ended the call. I let the quiet sit for a moment. It felt like good posture after years of slumping. I put on my jacket and drove to the branch where I had taken the second mortgage all those years ago. The lobby smelled faintly of printer ink and citrus cleaner. A small tree of metallic ornaments blinked from a side table, the kind of decoration that tries to make money feel festive. A man in a dark suit with a nameplate that said branch manager shook my hand and sat me in a glass-walled office where everyone could see the meeting, but no one could hear it. I slid my driver's license across the desk and told him what I had already done on the phone. I told him I wanted a printed confirmation, not an email. A paper stamped with today's date that said the recurring transfer had ended. He glanced at the screen, nodded, and tapped a keyboard without looking down, like a pianist who knows the piece by heart. He printed the letter and stamped it with an old-fashioned embosser that left a raised seal. I asked for a full transaction history of every transfer I had made to the mortgage account for Brookside Heights. He asked for the last 4 digits again, then printed the ledger with each month and amount in a neat line like the ticks on a yardstick. When he stapled it, I asked for it unstapled. I needed separate pages. He smiled like a person who understood the difference between paperwork and preparation. He slid the pages across to me one by one. On the way home, I stopped at the office supply store and did something I had not done since the year I bid jobs every week. I bought 6 heavy black binders, a stack of clear sheet protectors, 3 highlighters, and a box of manila envelopes thick enough to hold shame. I bought a pack of sticky tabs in red and yellow and blue. On the drive back, the radio played a Christmas song from the 70s, brass horns and a chorus that sounded like children, and I switched it off because nostalgia is a liar when it tries to sell you comfort without truth. I parked, carried the bags inside, and set them down on the dining table I had owned since Maria and I were newly married. I could still see the little knife mark on the edge where Michael at 5 had tried to carve his initials and then burst into tears when we told him the table would keep the scar. The table kept it. Now it would keep something else. I worked like I used to work on a job site. Slow at first, measuring twice, then fast once the pattern became clear. Bank confirmations in the first binder, ordered by year. Mortgage statements in the second. Receipts for the wedding in the third, each one taped to a sheet of plain paper with the total written in bold black ink under it, 50,000 in neat sums that told a story flowers and sparkles never admit. The down payment in the second mortgage papers on my own home, clipped behind it, the signature I had made that day, strong and naive and certain. For the 5th, I printed photographs from social media that Jennifer had posted with the kind of careless pride that forgets who pays the bill. The $800 handbag was held up to the mirror with a caption about treating myself. The professional mixer for $2,200 posed on a clean counter with a hashtag about baking season. Dinners out during the months I had paid their utilities. I did not add comments. I did not need to. The pictures were their own prosecution. In the 6th binder, I started what I knew would become the most important section, my notes. The dates of every significant conversation I could recall, written in simple lines as if a stranger would need to follow them later. The date Michael asked for help with the down payment. The day I signed the second mortgage. The first time I saw the new floors in their house and Jennifer said they finally looked refined. The day Michael lost his job and I covered 3 months just until he got back on his feet. The day he told me not to come for Christmas. Today, the call, the cancellation, the letter from Jennifer's lawyer. I wrote the law firm's name and underlined it twice. I was not building a monument to my generosity. I was constructing a timeline of truth. Late in the afternoon, I called a number I had not dialed in years. An attorney who used to handle permits for my construction business answered himself. He was older now. We both were. He asked about Maria. I told him she had been gone 8 years. He paused the way decent men pause and said he was sorry. I told him I needed basic advice, not a war. I summarized the 5 years in 5 sentences. I did not ask if the money could be retrieved. I asked what proof mattered if reputation was attacked. He said text messages where Michael acknowledged the help would matter. He said bank records that showed the flow from my account to their mortgage would matter. He said photos that connected the spending to months when they claimed hardship would matter. He said the word defamation in a careful voice, as if placing a fragile object on a shelf, and told me to write down dates, save screenshots, and stay calm. Then he told me something small and powerful. He said people who lie publicly often forget to keep their stories straight. He told me to watch for the seams. Before we hung up, he gave me his personal email and said to send copies, not originals. One more thing, he added. Get yourself a little voice recorder for your pocket. If you run into anyone and they start telling stories, you want your memory to have a witness. I thanked him. I did not tell him I had already ordered a recorder and a camera battery online that morning. When you cut a cord that has fed a machine for years, you expect silence. Sometimes you get noise. Around dinner time, my phone lit up, not with a call, but with a stream of texts from Michael. The first said he had heard from the bank. The second said he wished I had warned him. The third said Jennifer's parents were coming and there would be tension if I made things complicated. I read them all. I put the phone face down. I had learned long ago on job sites that people get loud when they are losing leverage. I would not match their noise with noise. I would answer with facts when the time was right. I ate a simple dinner, the way I always did when the house was quiet. Tomato soup and a grilled cheese. The soup steamed, the bread crisped, and the cheese ran to the edges. I thought about how many of these small, slow meals I had eaten while someone else photographed a steak I had paid for. I did not feel sad. I felt clear. When the dishes were done, I laid out manila envelopes on the dining table and labeled them with names. Not just Michael and Jennifer, their friends, the neighbors who loved to be hosted, the charity couple who always took photos near the fireplace. I was not planning an ambush. I was planning the truth in a language they understood. Paper, numbers, pictures. I slid the relevant pages into each envelope, not so thick that they would be dismissed as a rant, not so thin that the story could be dodged. At the top of each stack, I placed a single sheet with a short paragraph I had written in plain words. It said I had paid. It said how much. It said how long. It said I was told not to come to Christmas in a house where my money kept warm. It said I had canceled the payments and wished them well. It said I did not want pity. I wanted respect. I did not sign the page with a flourish. I wrote my name like a man signing for a shipment he had ordered carefully. At 8 o'clock, sharp my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw my neighbor, a kind man who minded his business and kept his yard neat. He held a tin of cookies that his wife baked each year. We traded the tin for a warm handshake. He asked if I was doing all right. I said I was. He said he had seen me carrying stacks of paper and wanted to make sure no one was taking advantage of me. I told him the odd thing about being taken advantage of is that you are usually the last to call it by its name. He nodded like a man who had watched grown children grow into strangers. He said Merry Christmas. I said it back. After he left, I sat a while and stared at the tree in my own living room. It was small this year, just lights and a strand of red beads Maria had found at a yard sale 20 years ago. It glowed the way small things glow when you remember who handed them to you. I said her name softly, and the room did not feel empty. Close to 9, the phone rang again. Not a number I recognized. I let it go to voicemail. When it buzzed with the message, I pressed play. The voice was careful, almost formal. It belonged to a woman who worked in the local business community and who knew everyone worth knowing. She said she had heard rumors. She said people were talking. She said if I needed to set the record straight, I should do it sooner rather than later, because stories, like fires, are easiest to put out before they spread. I saved the message. I stood at the window and watched the street. A car rolled past, slow, then another. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe my quiet life, lived in good faith, had already been pulled into a whispering circle I could not see. I did not feel fear. I felt the same steady resolve that had carried me through the morning. If they wanted to push this into the public square, they would find me there with my head up. I returned to the table and looked at the envelopes one more time, counting them not like a man counts ammunition, but like a man taking attendance at a meeting he has been forced to chair. 12. Enough for the usual crowd that gathered around their long table for holidays. I wrote the date on the corner of each envelope, December 24th. My hands did not shake now. The plan was not complicated. It did not depend on tricks or on anyone else doing the right thing. It depended only on the truth seen in daylight. I took a breath and said something out loud that sounded like a vow. They think I have lost, I said. But the game has only just begun. Tarde. Before I went to bed, I called my attorney back and left a short message. I told him I needed to stop by in the morning for 15 minutes so he could notarize a few pages and make certified copies. I told him I would bring the binders and a list of dates. I told him I had received a letter from the Whitman lawyer. I did not ask for his opinion on it over the phone. I would hand him the page and watch his eyes read it. I placed the 6 binders into my old leather briefcase, the one with a scar on the handle from a roofing nail that caught it 20 years ago, and set the bag by the door. The zipper's teeth closed with a sound I found satisfying, a sound like a line being drawn. I turned out the lights one by one and left the living room last. At the mantel, I touched the frame of Maria's photograph with the back of my fingers, the way I used to touch her cheek when I did not want to wake her. You always wanted me to stand tall, I said, half to her, half to the room. I am standing now. The house was quiet as a chapel. Outside, the neighborhood slept. Inside, on the table by the door, lay a set of envelopes that would change the temperature of a room. I did not kid myself. This would not be clean. It would not be gentle. But I was done pretending that gentleness was the same thing as love. I was done paying to be included. I was done being punished for my own kindness. I slept like a man who had put his tools in order. In the gray light before dawn, I woke, dressed in a plain shirt and a jacket that still held a faint scent of sawdust from a forgotten job. I carried the briefcase to the car and placed it on the front seat, the way you place something alive where you can keep your eye on it. Before I started the engine, I took out a pad and wrote one more list. It was not a list of numbers. It was a list of values, the ones Maria and I had said out loud over breakfast when Michael was little. Work hard. Keep your word. Tell the truth even when it hurts. Be grateful. Stand up when someone is pushed down. I read the words, and for a moment I could hear her voice saying them too. I folded the paper and slid it under the flap of the briefcase, a small anchor in a week where storms had names and addresses. As I pulled away from the curb, the first edge of the sun touched the roofs on our block and made the frost sparkle like glitter. It looked pretty. It also meant the streets would be slick. I drove carefully. I thought about the letter from Jennifer's lawyer again, and I smiled in a way that would have frightened me yesterday. They had meant to shut me up. They had meant to make me doubt what I knew. Instead, they had handed me the first page in a story I would be proud to tell. They wanted the world to think I was a nuisance who did not understand boundaries. I understood boundaries now. Mine, theirs. The line between help and harm. The line between love and leverage. I understood, and I would not forget again. By the time I parked in front of the attorney's building, the day had woken fully. Men in coats hurried along with briefcases of their own. Women with coffee cups moved with purpose. I joined them, not as a supplicant, but as a man with a purpose, too. In my pocket, my phone buzzed with a new text. I did not check it. I knew what it would say. Please dress as demanded. Demands dressed as pleasantries. I would read it later with the same calm I had used to cancel the transfer. There are moments in life when you can feel the gears shift. You do not hear the click so much as feel it in your bones. This was such a moment. I pushed through the glass doors and let them close behind me, the briefcase heavy and honest in my hand. They did not know I had something that would change everything. They did not even know what everything meant to me now. Respect, dignity, the right to sit at a table I had paid for, the right to walk away from it too. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor and felt the lift in my chest that comes when fear gives up its chair. If they wanted a fight in public, they would get one. If they wanted to pretend I was invisible, I would give them sight. I had bound my proof. I had found my spine. And this chapter, which had started with a phone call and a fire, would end with a signature and a small nod from a notary who would not know she had witnessed the beginning of the end of a lie. I stood a little taller and pushed open the door. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. The headline hit me before the coffee did. Page 4. A grainy photo of my face they must have pulled off my old company website. The caption under it used words like abandoned, elderly couple, and holiday storm. I read the first paragraph once, then again, slower. Local man leaves seniors stranded at SFO during winter weather advisory. Chapodidi. They didn't bother with my name until the second paragraph, as if my identity were a detail, not the target. The article quoted Thomas Whitman by name and Jennifer by implication, and it painted me the color of a villain. No context, no history, no mention that the temperature that day had been 55 and sunny. Just a simple story that made busy people shake their heads over breakfast. Cruel old man, helpless parents, holiday meanness. I set the paper down and watched the steam lift off my coffee like a spirit escaping. For a long moment, I didn't move. Then I felt it, the same steady resolve I had carried into the bank when I cut the cord. They had moved the fight into public. Good, I could stand in public. I called my attorney and kept my voice level. I told him which page. I told him the quotes. I told him who had been named. He asked me to take photographs of the article, front and back, headline and byline, date and page number. He asked me to email them and then to drop the physical paper by his office. He said, "This looks like defamation on its face if the facts are wrong and they knew it." He reminded me to breathe. He said we would send a litigation hold letter to the paper and to Thomas personally, preserving emails, texts, and drafts. He said we would not threaten in public. We would act. Then he told me to do something simple and hard. "Frank," he said, "stay calm. They want you angry. They want you loud. Don't give them the picture they wrote." I hung up, and the phone rang again before my hand left it. A voice from the business association, the president herself, polite and brittle. She had my name in that professional tone people use when they are about to hurt you on purpose and call it policy. "Frank, I'm so sorry," she began, "but until this story is cleared up, the board voted to suspend your membership and your honorary plaque. It's temporary." She paused and added, like a garnish, "You understand." I pictured the plaque with my name engraved on it, a token for 25 years of showing up. I pictured them taking it off the wall as if the brass were contagious. My jaw tightened for a beat, and then I felt something quiet press in. I told her I appreciated the call. I told her to keep the plaque polished. I told her stories turn. She exhaled, relieved I hadn't raised my voice, and promised to revisit it after the holidays. When the line went dead, I looked at the phone in my hand and almost laughed. They thought I would beg to be let back into rooms I had built. They thought they had taken my reputation. No, they had invited me to defend it. I spread my binders across the dining table with a calm I had to earn. Bank confirmations, mortgage statements, receipts from the $50,000 wedding, the down payment pulled from the $80,000 second mortgage on my home, and the photographs Jennifer loved to post when she forgot there was a bill attached to everything. The $800 purse, the $2,200 mixer, the dinners downtown during the months I covered their utilities. I slid each page into its sleeve like a mechanic laying out wrenches before a job. The sixth binder, the one for notes, sat open to the page where I had written yesterday's entry in block letters. Jennifer's lawyer letter, gratuitous transfer, no rights, cease. I added a fresh line, dated today. Chronicle article, Whitman quoted, "Stormlie, abandoned seniors," page 4. Under it, I wrote 2 words I would remember, even if the ink faded. Hold, calm. After lunch, my attorney called back. His voice was brisk now, the way voices sound when they stand up straight. He told me he had drafted 2 letters. The first, addressed to the paper's general counsel and the editor, cited the false weather claim and the omission of material facts, and demanded a retraction with prominence equal to the original publication. The second, addressed to Thomas Whitman, advised him to preserve all communications related to the article, and warned that any destruction of evidence would be considered spoliation. "We'll courier them," he said, "by the end of the day." He asked me if I had what we had talked about yesterday, proof that the transfers came from me to their mortgage, proof that Michael had acknowledged my help, proof of the day Jennifer told me I wasn't welcome. "I do," I said, and I looked at the neat stacks on the table. Then he asked a final question, the one that mattered, if they tried to pretend this was all just a misunderstanding. "Do you have a recording capability on you now?" I told him about the small recorder in my pocket and the fresh batteries in the drawer. He was quiet for a second. "Good," he said. "If anyone wants to talk it out, oblige them in a public place." He didn't have to say the rest. I didn't have to wait long. By mid-afternoon, my phone lit up with a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was short. "Let's be men about this. Coffee? 3 o'clock. The old brick cafe on L Street." No signature, no apology. I didn't need either to know who had written it. I typed back, 3 works. Then I slipped the recorder into my shirt pocket, checked the red light, and tucked the cord under the collar so it wouldn't catch. I took the binder with the transaction history and slid it into my briefcase, not to thump the table with it, but to remind myself I wasn't showing up empty. The cafe smelled like dark roast and vanilla. The late afternoon light came through the high windows and made the dust visible in slow, patient drifts. Thomas was already there, in a corner booth against the brick, suit immaculate, posture that practiced a mix of authority and relaxation. He did not stand when I arrived, but he gestured to the seat across from him as if the chair were his to offer. I sat. The recorder's red light glowed beneath the fabric near my throat. He began with the tone he used at fundraisers when a check had already been written. "Frank," he said, "there's no reason to escalate. It's the holidays. People say things. Emotions run high." I let him speak. He talked about narratives and perceptions. He talked about what the paper ran, as if the article had been a misbehaving dog that slipped its leash. Then he said the sentence he had come to say, the one he had rehearsed in a mirror. You know how these things work. I made a few calls. We framed the situation so people would understand. He smiled, small and satisfied. No harm meant. I picked up my coffee and took a slow sip. No harm meant, I repeated, as if tasting the phrase on my tongue. He shrugged and looked at the window like a man who prefers to be seen against rustic brick and natural light. My wife was upset. My daughter was embarrassed. We all were. You could have handled it differently. Consider this a lesson, Frank. The story will pass. The thing about people who love power is that they forget to keep their stories straight. Winter storm, I said, as if I were asking the weather. He frowned slightly, then nodded like an actor cued by a director off stage. Advisory, he said. It sounded better. He leaned in and lowered his voice, confiding in me like a buddy. Besides, she needed something with teeth. Lifestyle Desk doesn't run with simple family drama. He tapped the table with 2 fingers, a little drum of pride. You understand. I let the silence settle for a long beat. I didn't need to say much. The red light under my collar didn't need my commentary. It needed his certainty. So I asked one last question, gentle as a feather. You called the editor? He gave me that small, polished smile again. Old colleagues, friends of friends, the kind of connections you earn when you don't spend your life laying tile. He said it like a joke. I didn't laugh. I nodded, stood, and said, Thank you for the coffee. His eyebrows lifted, puzzled. I hadn't argued. We're done? He asked. We are, I said, and the words had the satisfying weight of a door closing. Back in my car, I sat quietly for a minute with my eyes on the steering wheel. My heart beat steadily. The recorder's light still glowed. I clicked it off and placed it gently in the glove box as if it were an egg I didn't want to crack. Then I called my attorney. I didn't tell the story like a story. I delivered the facts like measurements for a custom cut, where we met, what he admitted, and the exact phrases he used. We have him on tape, I finished. I heard the sound of his breath leaving in a quiet yes. Bring it now, he said. We'll make a transcript tonight. Courier a retraction demand in the morning with a copy and a litigation hold reminder to the paper. We'll CC their insurer. Let's see who blinks first. At home, I printed 2 more sets of bank records and an index page for the recording. I added a short written statement in plain language, 3 paragraphs that said what I had paid, how long, and what had been said about me in the paper compared to the Weather Service report for that day. I attached the screenshot of the temperature and the absence of any advisory. No drama, just facts. When the documents cooled from the printer, I slid them into sheet protectors and carried everything to the car. The evening had a winter blue to it now. Porch lights blinked on up and down the street. Families started dinners. Televisions came alive behind curtains. I drove downtown with the briefcase seat-belted in like a child. The law office's conference room was warm and smelled like paper and lemon polish. My attorney set the recorder on the table like an exhibit. He listened twice, then put on his reading glasses, clicked his pen, and wrote a short memo in bold, tight lines. He dictated, calmly, the cover letter to the paper's counsel, citing the admission, the falsehood, the harm, and the remedy. A retraction with equal prominence, an apology in clear language, and removal of the online version pending correction. He dictated the letter to Thomas, attaching a transcript excerpt and warning that further publications would only increase the damages. He used phrases I had only read on the back pages of business magazines: actual malice, reckless disregard, punitive damages, and he spoke them like a craftsman lists tools he trusts. He looked up at me once and said, "This changes the geometry." I nodded. I know. We were still stapling exhibits when my phone lit up with Michael's name. I didn't answer. The voicemail came through a minute later. His voice wobbled between angry and scared. He said I was making a scene. He said I was embarrassing him. He said I had overreacted, misunderstood, and threatened the family. The words rolled over each other like marbles. In the background, I could hear Jennifer saying something sharp I couldn't make out. I let the message finish. My attorney, who had raised teenagers, smiled without humor and slid a printed copy of the article into an envelope, marked with today's date in thick black marker. "Noise," he said. "We keep what matters." We sent the courier at 8. The night air outside had that soft dampness you only notice when you step out of heated rooms. My phone buzzed twice on the sidewalk. Unknown number. Then another. Then a text from a colleague I respected who asked, "Is it true?" I typed a short answer. "No, I have proof. You'll see a correction." She wrote back a single word. "Good." I tucked the phone away and walked to the car. Some nights feel like thresholds, not celebrations, not defeats. Just the kind of crossing you can feel in your ankles and knees and the back of your neck, the places that have carried weight without complaint. This was one. The next morning began with a call I expected and still had to brace for. The business association again. Same president, different tone. She had received a copy of our letter from someone on the board. She had heard there was a recording. Her voice tried to be light, but the effort showed at the edges. "Frank, perhaps we acted too quickly yesterday," she said. "Of course, we'll wait for the paper's response," I told her. I appreciated the reconsideration. I told her to keep the plaque where it was for now, because nothing had been decided. She was eager to be back on the safe side of a line she hadn't drawn. "Of course," she said. "Keep us updated." I hung up and let the petty satisfaction pass through me, then leave. I had other work to do. By 10, the paper's counsel had acknowledged receipt of our demand, a short email, cautious in every syllable. They were reviewing the matter. They took accuracy seriously. They valued community trust. They asked formally for a copy of the entire recording. My attorney wrote back that we would provide a portion sufficient to correct the record, not for their content library, and reminded them to preserve their communications with the Whitmans. Then he turned to me and said something I will not forget. "They're not scared of you, Frank. They're scared of discovery." He took his glasses off and rubbed the bridge of his nose. And they should be. At noon, Thomas called. Not text. Call. I let it go to voicemail the first time. He called again immediately. I answered. His voice had lost the fundraiser gloss. "You made a mistake," he said, as if he were narrating my life from 30,000 feet. "You don't want to pick this fight." He paused, then tried a different track, the one men use when they want to sound reasonable. "Take the high road. You drop your nonsense, and I'll make sure a small clarification runs after Christmas. We all move on." I kept my voice low and steady. "You lied in print," I said. "You admitted it yesterday. That's not a clarification. That's a correction and an apology." He huffed, the sound a man makes when a door doesn't open the way it usually does. "You're punching above your weight," he said, dropping the mask. "You think anyone cares about a few $1,000s here and there?" My calm surprised even me. $180,000 in mortgage, I said. $80,000 in down payment. $50,000 for a wedding. $20,000 for furniture and floors. I care, and I am not alone. Jean-O. He called me a name he wouldn't say at a podium. I let him have the last word because the recorder on my phone had already taken it. By late afternoon, the paper posted a small notice online. Not a retraction. Not yet. A modest, careful sentence at the bottom of the original article. "We are reviewing details related to this story." It wasn't much. It was the first hairline crack in a pane of glass. I screenshotted it and saved it to the binder and sent the image to my attorney. He wrote back 2 words. They blinked. I spent the early evening doing what I had promised myself I would do if this ever moved past whispers. I assembled the envelope packets for the people who sat at Jennifer and Michael's table for the holidays. 12 envelopes. 12, each contained a simple, readable set: the ledger of my monthly payments, the bank confirmations for the transfers, the copy of the second mortgage on my home for the down payment, a photo or two of the spending that had happened during the months I covered their bills, and a one-page statement in plain language. No insults, no speculation, just the truth. At the top, I wrote a sentence that even I would read in a hurry. If you read the article about me, here are the facts. At the bottom, I wrote my name and my phone number. If anyone wanted to check, they could call me directly. I wasn't hiding behind anyone's office. As I sealed the envelopes, my doorbell rang again. Not a neighbor. Michael. He stood on my porch with his hands empty, eyes rimmed red like he hadn't slept. For a second, I saw the boy, 5 years old, who cut his initials in our old dining table. Then the man stood there again, and the boy was gone. He said he wanted to talk. I told him he could. I let him in and sat him in the chair by the window where the light found every expression. He started with a plea dressed as fairness. "Dad, you don't have to destroy us to make your point." I held my breath long enough to choose my words. "I didn't write the article," I said. "I didn't call the editor. I didn't say there was a storm." He looked down, then up, then away. "Jennifer's father. He's just protecting us." I nodded. "By lying about me." He rubbed his face like a man trying to wake himself from a bad dream. "We can fix this after Christmas," he said. "Let it pass." I shook my head. "No," I said. "Not this time." He swallowed hard. "You think this makes you look strong?" he asked, almost gentle. "I think it makes me look like a man telling the truth," I said. "And that will be enough." He left without slamming the door. The house settled around his absence, like a pond goes still after a thrown rock. I stood a long time by the window, then turned back to the table. I took a deep breath and spoke to the photograph on the mantel, the way I always did when I needed steadiness. "Maria," I said, "I never wanted a stage. They gave me one, so I'll stand there and speak." The tree lights glowed, small and constant. The smell of pine and old ornaments drifted up when I opened the box to find the red ribbon I used to tie around packages. I tied one around the stack of envelopes for no reason other than it made the truth look like a gift. In a way, it was. At 9, my attorney called one more time. He had received an email from the paper's counsel asking for a meeting the next morning. "They're trying to land the plane before it catches fire," he said. "Good. We'll bring the recording and 2 options, a retraction and apology, or a courtroom after New Year's." He cleared his throat and softened a shade. "Frank, I need to say this. Whatever else happens, you did the hard thing the right way." I thanked him and told him I'd see him at 8:30. Wati. When I hung up, I realized my hands were steady again. Not because I had won, because I had chosen not to lose myself. Before bed, I wrote one more note in the 6th binder, the one for my own memory. December 23rd. Paper acknowledged review. Business Association reconsidering. Recording secured. Envelopes prepared. Meeting scheduled. Dinner tomorrow. I underlined the last word. Tomorrow. Christmas Eve. The date on the calendar is circled in red for one reason now. It would not be the night I sat alone in a quiet house, swallowing humiliation. It would be the night the truth sat down at a table it had already paid for. I turned off the lights and walked the slow path down the hall. When I lay down, I thought of a phrase Thomas had used at the cafe. He called it a lesson. He said the story would pass. I smiled in the dark. Lessons do pass. Good ones leave marks. By morning, something else would be marked too, and not by me alone. If you're listening now, if you've stayed with me through the paper, the phone calls, the quiet work at my table, then you know what this chapter was for. Not the explosion, the fuse, not the applause. The stage was being built, plank by plank, so nobody could say it appeared from thin air. At sunrise, I would carry my briefcase through one more set of glass doors, and we would talk about corrections and apologies in a room with a view of the river. Then, at sundown, I would carry 12 envelopes to one house, a $600,000 house that had turned me away, and I would knock. People would stand. People would whisper. People would open paper and read numbers and dates and sentences so plain they would feel heavy. Some would be angry at me for ruining a party. Others would be angry at themselves for clapping at the wrong moment. Either way, the weather would be clear, and the truth would be present. I slept. When the morning came, it felt like the pause before a song, that half-second of silence when the room pulls a breath together. I put on the same jacket. I picked up the same briefcase. I touched Maria's photo with 2 fingers. Then I stepped out into the bright, cold air and locked the door behind me. Feeling dismissed and used is hard, isn't it? If you believe every person deserves to be seen and treated with respect, comment justice. Now watch what they will do to change that. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. I remember the cold bite of Christmas Eve air when I walked up the stone steps of the $600,000 house I had helped build. The lights sparkled across the lawn, the windows glowed warm, and the sound of laughter spilled out as if the walls themselves were mocking me. I stood for a moment at the door, holding my leather case, feeling the weight of every receipt, every transfer, every sacrifice that had been turned into an insult. Then I pushed the bell. Inside, the chatter dimmed. When the door opened, I didn't wait for an invitation. I stepped into the foyer, my boots firm on the polished hardwood that had been paid for with my money. Heads turned, conversations stalled, glasses froze halfway to lips. It was the kind of silence that makes a room hold its breath. I didn't waste words. I reached into the case and pulled out the thick envelopes I had prepared, 12 in total. Each is labeled with a guest's name. I moved down the long dining table, placing one before every plate like a grim gift. The rustle of paper filled the room. Some guests glanced nervously at one another before daring to open theirs. I waited. And then the first gasp broke the quiet. Page after page, bank statements, mortgage transfers, checks written for tuition, for cars, for a wedding that had been called the celebration of the year. In black and white, over $250,000 were documented. Some faces turned pale, others flushed with shame. Whispers became questions, and questions became demands, aimed not at me, but at Jennifer and her parents. "Is this true?" someone asked. "All of this from him?" another pressed. The room no longer looked at me as the villain in a headline. They looked at me as the man who had been wronged. Jennifer's father, Thomas Whitman, rose from his chair with a theatrical sigh, his face tightening. "This is a stunt," he declared, his voice carrying the brittle edge of a man used to control. "A desperate attempt to smear our family during Christmas." His wife Margaret nodded sharply beside him, her pearls trembling against her throat. "He's confused," she added. "He's bitter. He doesn't understand how family works anymore." But their words fell flat against the evidence in every guest's hands. One woman pointed to the signature line on a check. Another read aloud the date of a transfer. It wasn't my voice convicting them. It was their own handwriting, their own numbers, their own greed exposed in the language no one could deny. Money. Michael's face was the one I searched for. My son. His eyes darted across the pages, widening with each line. He looked up at Jennifer, then at me, then back down at the numbers as if they were foreign script. "Dad," he began, but his voice cracked. "Is this all real?" He looked at his wife again, his voice a whisper now. "You told me." He couldn't finish. Jennifer tried to gather herself, her cheeks blazing red. "He offered it, Michael," she snapped, her voice shrill. "He gave it freely. He said it was what fathers do. And now he's twisting it to make us look like thieves. Shait." But the tremor in her words betrayed her. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some leaning back as if the distance might shield them from the collapse. It was then that I spoke, my voice calm, steady, cutting through the noise like a knife through cloth. "I did not abandon anyone at an airport. I abandoned betrayal. I abandoned the people who turned me into a walking bank account and tried to erase my worth. I looked at each face around the table, then let my eyes rest on Jennifer and her parents. This isn't bitterness. This is the truth, and truth doesn't need an invitation to dinner. The room erupted. Some guests tried to mediate, others demanded explanations. Thomas raised his hands, shouting about context and generosity twisted into malice, but the papers in front of them spoke louder. Margaret attempted to comfort Jennifer, who now sat rigid, lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes refusing to meet Michael's. He sat there, the pages trembling in his hands, the image of a son realizing the story he had been fed was rotten. My heart ached for him even as anger burned. This was his moment of reckoning, and nothing I could say would soften it. He had to see it, to feel it, to know it. I didn't stay to watch the unraveling. My purpose wasn't to destroy them in that room. My purpose was to free myself from the lie. I gathered the last of the unopened envelopes from my case, laid them on the sideboard, and said simply, "Keep them. Pass them on. Let the truth travel faster than the lies." With that, I turned toward the door. Someone called my name, but I didn't stop. I didn't need their approval, their pity, or their apologies. The night air hit me as I stepped outside, cold and sharp, but for the first time in years, I breathed freely. Behind me, the house glowed, a box of wealth and pretenses, but I felt no envy, not anymore. I had carried the burden of their betrayal long enough. Tonight I had set it down. As I walked to my car, the muffled chaos from inside followed me. Raised voices, arguments, excuses, the shattering of a false image. But it didn't belong to me anymore. That storm was theirs to weather. For me, the night sky was clear, the stars sharp, the silence sweet. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel. A weight I hadn't realized I still carried lifted, leaving me lighter than I thought possible. I whispered into the empty car the way I often spoke to Maria. "It's done, love. They can't touch me anymore." And I felt her presence in the stillness, as if she were sitting beside me, smiling that quiet smile she always gave when I finally stood my ground. The days that followed only confirmed what I already knew. The Whitman's name, once untouchable in certain circles, began to unravel. Invitations dried up. Business partners grew cautious. Whispers traveled quickly through a town that thrived on reputation. Jennifer's carefully curated image on social media went silent, her bright photos replaced with absence. Michael withdrew, torn between loyalty to a wife whose lies had been revealed and the father he had judged too quickly. I didn't chase him. I didn't demand his apology. That wasn't my victory to seek. My victory was here, in the quiet mornings when I rose without dread, in the evenings when I sat with a book in my modest living room, the television humming softly in the background. My victory was the absence of chains. I found peace in the simplest things. A walk to the park with the frost crunching under my shoes. A cup of coffee at the corner diner where the waitress called me by name and smiled without judgment. A new apartment overlooking a small square, bought with the money I had saved once I stopped funneling it into their debts. $200,000. Enough for comfort, enough for dignity. The view from my window was of children playing and neighbors greeting each other, not of a fortress that had locked me out. I furnished it simply: an oak table, a recliner, a few framed photographs of Maria and me when the world was kinder. For the first time in years, I felt at home. Michael called once. His voice was heavy, searching. He asked if we could talk. I listened, then told him gently, "Not yet, son. Not now. Some things need distance." He didn't argue. He said he understood. I could hear the regret in his voice, but I didn't reach out to rescue him from it. He needed to live with the truth just as I had lived with betrayal. I wasn't cruel. I was clear. Clarity, I realized, was the gift I had denied myself for too long. Jennifer never called, neither did her parents. But I saw the consequences. They sold their vacation property quietly, whispers of financial strain trickling through town. A family that had once looked down its nose at me now looked away entirely, unable to meet the gaze of the man they had tried to erase. That was their fate. Mine was different. Mine was freedom. I sat many evenings in my new apartment, the window cracked just enough to let in the cool night air, and I thought about what this journey had taught me. I thought about how blood alone doesn't make a family, how respect and honesty are the mortar that holds it together. Without them, a house is just wood and brick. Without them, a son can turn into a stranger, and a daughter-in-law into an enemy. I thought about how easy it is to mistake sacrifice for love, and how dangerous it is to forget that love without respect is just exploitation. And I realized something simple, something I whispered out loud more than once. I don't need them anymore. I have myself, and that's enough. The story could have ended there, with me in quiet victory. But life doesn't end at victory. It begins there. I started to attend meetings at the community center, at first just to listen. People my age talking about finances, about setting boundaries with children who had grown entitled, about learning to say no. I found myself nodding, speaking, then leading. One evening, someone asked if I would share my story. I did, not with anger, but with honesty. When I finished, the room was silent, then filled with applause. Not because I had suffered, but because I had survived. And in their faces, I saw what Maria would have wanted for me all along, not bitterness, but belonging. As the year turned, I knew my journey wasn't over. There would be other challenges, other regrets, perhaps even reconciliations in time. But I was no longer afraid. The past had tried to bury me in lies, and I had clawed my way back with truth. Now, every day felt like a gift unwrapped slowly. And as I stood one evening at my window, watching the sunset over the park, I thought of what lay ahead. Maybe a new project? Maybe volunteering? Maybe just the peace of another quiet night? Whatever it was, it would be mine, chosen freely, carried with dignity. And that was enough. I sold my old house for $200,000 and signed the papers without a trace of regret. That house had carried too many shadows, too many memories of money drained and respect withheld. I took the check, put it towards something simpler, something mine. A modest apartment by the park, the kind of place with a balcony just wide enough for a chair and a small table. It wasn't much, but when I opened the windows, I could smell the grass after a rain, hear the children's laughter drift in, and watch the sun slide behind the trees every evening. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking into a prison of obligations. I felt like I was walking home. The first morning in that new place, I brewed coffee in a $10 pot I bought myself, nothing fancy, and I stood by the window holding the cup close. The park was still wet with dew, and a man walked his dog, waving at strangers as he passed. I realized I hadn't seen a genuine wave in months, not one that wasn't attached to expectation or politeness. I lifted my hand, and the man waved back without needing anything from me. That small moment settled into my chest like a bomb. Peace doesn't come in grand gestures. Sometimes it comes in a nod from a stranger, in the quiet steam of a morning coffee, in a home where no one can push you out. I joined the community group at the center across the street, mostly because I wanted to listen. Folks sat in folding chairs, sharing stories about life after 60, about downsizing, about being forgotten, about children who had turned distant or ungrateful. I listened, nodding, realizing my story was not unique. When they asked me to speak, I told them the truth. I told them how I had paid tuition, bought cars, covered weddings, and funded a house that I was later forbidden to enter. I told them about the lies spread in my name, about the night I laid the evidence on the table for the world to see. There was no applause in that moment, just silence. Then one man said softly, "That could have been me." And the silence broke into murmurs of understanding, of shared pain. That's when I realized I had found something Maria always wanted for me. Belonging without conditions. Meanwhile, the Whitmans faced their own unraveling. I heard from a friend at the diner that Michael and Jennifer had lost the house. Foreclosure. The bank finally called in what I no longer carried for them. They packed their things into boxes and moved into a cramped rental off a busy street. No marble floors, no silk curtains, no manicured lawns. Just walls that echoed with loss. Thomas and Margaret saw their influence in business circles wane. Invitations disappeared, phone calls went unanswered. Deals slipped away like sand through fingers. They had built their power on reputation, and once it was stained, there was no scrubbing it clean. I didn't rejoice in their downfall. I didn't need to. Their collapse wasn't my victory. My victory was the quiet in my own life. Michael tried reaching out once. He sent a letter, not long, but enough to show he had seen the wreckage for what it was. He wrote, "Dad, I know now what they did. I know what I allowed. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to hear me say it." I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Not because I hated him, but because some wounds don't close with words. I whispered into the stillness, "I don't need their apologies. I have my life, and that's enough." And for the first time, I truly believed it. The contrast between our lives couldn't have been sharper. I spent my evenings walking in the park, nodding to neighbors, listening to the rustle of leaves. They spent theirs in arguments over bills, with curtains drawn against a world that no longer admired them. That contrast was the final lesson. Peace is not about wealth. Peace is about dignity, about knowing you are no longer living at the mercy of those who see you as less than you are. I thought about the lessons I had learned, the kind I wished every parent and child could hear before it was too late. For parents, never sacrifice so blindly that you lose yourself. Love is not measured in the size of checks you write or the houses you build for others. Love without respect turns into servitude, and no parent deserves to be a servant in their own family. For children, respect your parents while they are still here to give you their wisdom. Do not let ambition or the whispers of spouses or in-laws blind you to the hands that carried you this far. Money can buy many things, but it cannot buy back time or undo betrayal. And for the world we live in now, where greed wears the mask of success, remember this: character is the only wealth no one can steal. Titles fade, fortunes crumble, reputations crack, but integrity endures. One afternoon, I found an old box while sorting through things I had brought from the house. Inside was a watch, my father's watch. The glass was scratched, the leather strap worn thin, but it still ticked. I set it on the table beside my chair, listening to the steady rhythm. It reminded me that time is the one currency we all spend, whether wisely or foolishly. For too long, I had spent it on people who did not value me. Now every tick felt like a reminder that I was finally investing it in myself. I smiled at the thought, whispering, "Every day is proof I chose right." I began volunteering at the community center, just a few hours each week, helping with the food pantry, listening to people's stories, offering advice when asked. The work was simple, but it filled me in ways that money never had. Children handed me thank you cards drawn in crayon. Older folks patted my shoulder and said, "Glad to see you here." No one asked me for checks. No one erased my name. They saw me. And sometimes that is all a person really needs, to be seen. The last time I thought about contacting Michael, I stopped myself. Not out of anger, but because I knew the line I had drawn was not to punish him, but to protect me. He may one day find his own peace. He may one day come to me with more than apologies, with change. Until then, I keep my distance. I live my truth. The past is a story I survived. The future is a story I get to write. So I sit on the bench at the edge of the park, watching the sun lower itself into the horizon, painting the sky with colors that seem almost too generous to be real. I lean back, breathe deep, and let the warmth of it sink into my chest. I smile, not because everything is perfect, but because I am free. Free from lies, free from servitude, free to be myself again. I whisper into the fading light. I finally found where I belong. And I know Maria would be proud. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.